In February 2011, a dictator who had been in power for 30 years stepped down after his 3 decades in power. He was pushed out after weeks of mostly, but not entirely, peaceful demonstrations in Egypt. It was one of those "I remember where I was" moments.
This is an NBC News special report. Revolution in Egypt. Here's Brian Williams.
Good day from New York. If you've been following the news throughout this day, then you know the news that the people of Egypt have toppled their government. Their leader, Hosni Mubarak, has left power and left Cairo.
This is the statement they have been waiting for. Not that he's in Egypt, not that he is in Sharm el-Sheikh, but that he is stepping down. This, again, one of the cheers that has been iconic throughout all this. The army and the people, hand in hand. And today, the army is stepping in to join with the people, and now will be taking charge to hand over this position.
There are very few news days in this business where the breaking news banner is not only in all caps, but all caps and italics. It's a big deal, right? Mubarak gone after 30 years. And what Richard was talking about there was the chant, the army and the people hand in hand. When Mubarak gave up power in Egypt after 30 years, the military in that country was a ultimately decisive factor. Thousands of people camped in Tahrir Square and protested against Mubarak night after night and day after day. But the army, by and large, stayed on the sidelines. The army was visible, but they did not interfere in the demonstrations or attack the protesters. They tried to stay on basically friendly terms with the people in the streets, but mostly they stayed out of it. Until this moment, this game-changing moment, the High Council of the Armed Forces in Egypt, this High Council of the Armed Forces convened without President Mubarak on February 10th, 2011. That was only the 3rd time they'd ever met. And they announced that they would support the legitimate demands of the people. Since the demands of the people were really just one demand, that Mubarak step down, the military meeting that day without him and announcing that they would support that demand, that was the end. That meeting of the High Council of the Armed Forces, it was on February 10th. And on February 11th, one day later, Mubarak was gone. The military is a very powerful and very independent institution in Egypt. And when they decided to weigh in and say Mubarak had to go, Mubarak had to go. After 30 years in power, he was gone. It was just a remarkable moment. And it paved the way for new presidential elections in Egypt. Egyptians picked this guy, Mohammed Morsi. He was inaugurated a year ago yesterday. And yesterday this year, Egyptians marked that 1-year anniversary with the largest protests the country has seen since the revolution that toppled Mubarak in the first place. Over the past 2 days, in half a dozen cities, there have been massive protests in Egypt again. 16 people have died, hundreds of people have been injured. A young American who was in Egypt to teach English for the summer was killed in the protests in Alexandria. He was a 21-year-old college student from Maryland named Andrew Proctor. At the protest this weekend, protesters swarmed the headquarters of President Morsi's political party. They destroyed the headquarters. They lit the place on fire. They looted it. The people inside the headquarters were reportedly evacuated, but not before somebody fired actual live rounds into the crowd, reportedly killing 8 people. A year after he took office, protesters are demanding that Egyptian President Mohammed Morsi step down for the country to hold early new presidential elections. The people are back in Tahrir Square in an apparent reenactment of the demonstrations that brought down the last guy. And just like it was in 2011, everybody this time around has been waiting for a sign from the military. What side will the military take? Well, today the military spoke. It was an audio statement from the head of the Egyptian military that played on state TV today. And the message seemed to be clear. The military said it was giving President Morsi 48 hours to meet the demands of the people, whatever that means, or else the military will implement its own roadmap to resolve the political crisis, whatever that means. The terms are vague, but the timeline is not. They are demanding a political response to resolve the crisis in 48 hours, or the military says it will step in. This is an ultimatum. As if to mark the occasion, the military flew helicopters over Tahrir Square. And you see there's something underneath the helicopters there. They're towing Egyptian flags. The crowd cheered and cheered and cheered. So the same institution that ended the last guy's decades-long hold on power is now giving the new democratically elected president 48 hours as a deadline. Fix what is causing the people to be upset with you and to pour into the streets by the millions, or the military will fix it for you. How does the president meet the military's demands? What would that look like? What does the military do if the protests continue? Is the most populous country in the Middle East, one of the most strategically important countries on earth, about to get a new regime in the next 48 hours? Don't know. But this is happening very quickly, and it's really important. Watch this space.